Okay, well, I hope everyone can hear me. Let me begin by first of all welcoming all of you to this presentation on creatine. We're going to do a pretty deep dive into the remarkable and yet often unknown creatine benefits, specifically focusing on the therapeutic benefits. My name is Nelson Narciso. I am a holistic nutritionist, a Reiki practitioner, herbalist, and a auricular therapist. I've been in this field now for just shy of 30 years, doing seminars across North America to everyone from basically retailers to consumer groups to health professionals and many more. And I've had the privilege of being able to do this and hopefully educate as many people as I can on the remarkable benefits that lifestyle, diet, and supplementation can play in the role of health. Before I go any further, I just want to read out this disclaimer. I want people to understand that this presentation is strictly for educational and informational purposes only. It's not intended to provide you with medical advice. So if anyone has a condition which I happen to reference, understand that I'm not suggesting they use creatine, even though the research has shown some benefit. It's all the evidence I'm providing is really just evidence-based. There's research and oftentimes loads and loads of research, as you'll come to see, looking at these various areas. However, it is extremely important that someone that might have a condition like this consult with a healthcare professional before starting any supplement, let alone certainly creatine. So I just want to get that out of the way so that people don't think this is any way intended to diagnose or provide medical advice. Okay, let's look at this, really exciting topic of creatine, and really understand that creatine's functions extend well beyond just muscle performance and exercise. And I'd like to begin by sharing with you a couple of stories that first turned me on to the remarkable therapeutic benefits that creatine has to offer. So many years ago, I think roughly about 28 to 30 years ago, thereabouts, I attended a longevity conference in Vegas. And at that conference, a medical doctor who had a longevity clinic, really well known in this field for helping people live longer, healthier lives, started talking about various strategies to live a long and healthy life. And one of the things that struck me was he started talking about creatine, and he said he gives pretty much all of his patients creatine. And I thought that was interesting because back then, creatine was really pigeonholed in that sports nutrition category. It's for individuals that wanted to exercise, weight train, that were involved in activities that involved high intensity, short duration. So things like powerlifting, weightlifting, rowing, sprinting, and the like. So having this doctor talk about creatine in a therapeutic context was really quite interesting, and I made a note of it. And of course, I am a research geek. I went onto a site called PubMed. It's a website, pubmed.com, where they publish research, medical research. And to my pleasant surprise, there was already quite a bit of research looking at creatine therapeutically. Well, fast forward a few years later, I'm at a health food store. I knew the retailer quite well. And he was tied up with a customer, and there was an older gentleman, a senior, walking around the store that clearly needed some help. So he asked me if I could, talk to the customer and give him a hand. So in talking to this customer, what was really quite amazing was that he said he was buying creatine. And I ignorantly assumed he was buying it for one of his grandkids. It turns out he was buying it for himself. So what he began to tell me was this, issue he struggled with, which was, he was finding he didn't have the energy and stamina he used to have, and he was an avid golf player. And for quite a number of years, more recently, his golf game had declined dramatically, and that really seemed to upset him. And he said he was talking to his medical doctor about this and said, "Is there something I can do to just have more energy, more stamina, play golf?" And really, to even my surprise, the doctor told him to consider using creatine. I wish I had some at the time foresight to ask for the name of the doctor and could have reached out to him and spoken to him about this because he was really pretty progressive at that time, not a common thing for doctors to be recommending. Well, anyway, this gentleman began to use creatine, and it made a substantial difference in his ability to play the game. He was really quite excited about telling me this story because he was able to play an 18 holes of golf again, which he said he hadn't been able to do for quite some time. So anyway, these are just two of the many examples I could share with you that really early on, many years ago now, opened my eyes and my understanding to the enormous potential creatine has to hold outside of just sport. Yes, in the case of golf, it's sport, but it was in this case a elderly gentleman, a senior, who was noticing that his game was declining, and this sort of seemed to get him back where he wanted to be. So let's begin by doing a bit of a deeper dive into creatine and understanding that once again it sort of was a niche product and still is a very important supplement in the world of bodybuilding, in the world of muscle. And there have been literally thousands and thousands of users, if not hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of users that have used creatine knowing that the research, and this is research, has shown it enhances exercise performance, speeds up recovery, and can reduce injuries in sports. So, for example, reduce concussive injury is one, and we'll talk about this later in the presentation. And I'll summarize this quite, I think, effectively by quoting a part of a study published by the International Society of Sports Nutrition, one of the preeminent journals and associations looking at sport. And they stated creatine monohydrate is the most effective ergogenic nutritional supplement currently available to athletes in terms of increasing high intensity exercise capacity and lean body mass during training. So suffice it to say, there is no other supplement in the world of muscle, ergogenic aids, etc., that have been shown to be as effective as creatine. There's over 20 years of research showing creatine's benefits are extraordinary. And once again, there are hundreds and hundreds of studies. In fact, creatine is the most studied sports supplement and one of the, if not the most studied supplement, period. So there's loads and loads of research on creatine. We know a lot about it. It has a long history of use, a long history of safety in terms of its applications in many areas. So a lot of research. But what people often haven't recognized, and this is not only consumers, but retailers and health professionals, and I've had the privilege of doing lots of talks for both health professionals and retailers over the years, many simply don't appreciate or recognize the remarkable benefits that creatine has to offer. It's really been in the last few years that we're hearing more chatter about this. Now, I will say I've tried to do my part. I have been literally presenting on creatine's therapeutic benefits for over 2 decades. But of course, you can't reach the masses. Well, I guess you can if you're active on social media, which I am not, unfortunately. But we do know that more recently there has been a lot of chatter about this. But I do want to make this clear. Some of these individuals on YouTube and influencers are stating that this is new information. It's not. There has been a lot of research for creatine for many, many decades now. So this is not new. It's new in the sense that it's now being presented or repackaged to more consumers, but it's certainly not new information. So once again, the goal here is to better inform your customers, your patients on the benefits of creatine and how those benefits extend beyond simply exercise. So what is creatine? Well, it is a natural compound. We actually make it in the body. It's something we make endogenously. We make it in the liver, kidneys, and pancreas, but we make it in other areas as well. But those are the three dominant organs in which we make creatine. And we make about 1 to 2 grams of creatine per day in the body. And we also consume it through foods. We, on average, consume 1 to 2 grams. And I say on average because it can fluctuate, of course, based on your diet. It also is very dependent on whether you are a omnivore, you eat both plant and animal foods, or you are a strict vegan. If you're a strict vegan, the levels are lower because although there's very, very small amounts in plants, it's well below the amounts found in animal products. And in fact, I, for many years earlier, when I first started talking about creatine, always talked about the most abundant source of creatine is in red meat. It turns out the richest source of creatine is actually herring, then followed by meat, by beef. But the point is that you get it from food. So 1 to 2 grams produced in the body, 1 to 2 grams consumed if you're an omnivore through foods. Creatine is stored in the organs and tissues in the form called phosphocreatine. About 95% of that stored creatine is in the muscles, but there's also some stored creatine in the brain, in the testes, heart, and other organs as well. And one of the very important and one of the critical functions of creatine, probably the most important function that creatine has, is its ability to fuel ATP production when there's high energy demand activities. So once again, rowing, sprinting, bodybuilding, powerlifting, etc. And ATP, for those who don't know, is the energy currency of the body. It stands for, it's an acronym, adenosine triphosphate. And this is the energy currency of the body. So, by way of analogy, you have, let's say, an engine. In this case, the engine is the mitochondria. And the fuel for that engine, or the fuel for the mitochondria, is ATP. In the case of the engine, of course, it would be gasoline, or if it's an electric powered vehicle, it would be, of course, electricity. But the point is, it's the energy currency of the body. And adenosine triphosphate, because it is the main energy source, it's used for essentially everything. I mean, what activity, and I can't think of any, doesn't require energy? Well, everything requires energy. Every time your muscles contract, every time you think, your brain requires ATP. So all things that require energy use this currency in the body called adenosine triphosphate. But your body can only store and produce a small amount at one time. So how does creatine help? How does creatine fit into ATP and energy? So when ATP is used, it loses a phosphate group. And adenosine triphosphate, so three phosphates, turns into, when it's used up as energy, adenosine diphosphate. So it liberates or gives up a phosphate group. In so doing, you end up generating energy. So to keep making energy, your body needs to turn that adenosine diphosphate back into adenosine triphosphate. It needs to essentially recycle that. And that's where creatine comes in. So creatine, which once again is stored primarily in the muscles in the form of phosphocreatine, phosphorus, the phosphocreatine donates a phosphate, turning adenosine diphosphate quickly back into adenosine triphosphate. I know it sounds very complicated, but just think of it simply this way. It essentially gives your body an instant energy boost. So really simply put, your muscles keep a backup wallet called phosphocreatine. And when you run out of energy, in this case, energy cash or currency, ATP, the phosphocreatine quickly gives up some of that coin or that currency, in this case, phosphate, to recharge, to rebuild, to fill up your energy currency, your bank account, if you will. And it lets you ultimately, at the end of the day, excuse me, what it ultimately does is for high cost activities, for energy activities that are very energy intensive. It allows you to kind of get the energy that you need, sprinting, lifting, intense workouts, for mentally draining tasks during times of stress where there's this higher requirement for energy, which also can oftentimes result with the increased in levels of stress, impact sleep, etc. All these things have a profound impact on one's energy stores, and creatine can play a very, very important role in that regard. So simply put, and this is really the way I would package this and talk to customers about this without getting too technical, is creatine helps you make fast energy when you need it the most. So it's there on reserve. It's there when your body needs that energy. It's there to help give it a bit of a boost. So what are some of the therapeutic benefits of creatine? Well, there are, as you'll see, many, many notable benefits. This journal, I thought, summed it up quite nicely and really highlighted the critical nature of creatine. You know, we all think of creatine and we think of it once again in the context of sports nutrition. Yet this study suggested, in fact, they went on to say that creatine, in their estimation, should be classified as an essential amino acid. The study is, by the way, the journal is called the Journal of Advances in Nutrition. And they said we cannot produce enough creatine to meet our needs and everyone should supplement. I'll read this verbatim. The quantity of creatine the body naturally synthesizes is not sufficient to meet human needs. As a result, humans have to obtain enough creatine from the diet, which nominates creatine as an essential nutrient in certain circumstances. To be more accurate, that would not nominate creatine as an essential nutrient. It would nominate creatine as what's called a conditionally essential amino acid or nutrient, more specifically, a nutrient. So conditional, essential, they're different, right? So essential means we cannot make it. It must therefore come from the diet. A conditionally essential nutrient is a nutrient that we can make, but under certain conditions, we can't make enough to meet our demands. So creatine, more accurately, where the study got it wrong, was called it essential. It would be more appropriately called a conditionally essential nutrient. And I'm not going to go into this. This is for you to read at your leisure when you get a copy of this presentation, but I kind of break this down further and kind of help explain the case they make for why creatine, in their estimation, should really be classified as an essential nutrient. Of course, as I mentioned before, actually a conditionally essential nutrient. Here's a nice infographic from a study. It was from the journal Bioinformatics Assisted Review. Sorry, the journal actually is called Nutrients. The actual study was called Metabolic Basis of Creatine in Health and Disease. But you can see all these amazing benefits. The epithelial and inner ear cells, astrocytes and neuron cells, photoreceptor and lens cells, cardiomicrocytes, the impact it has on the microbiota, the bacteria in the gut. Male reproductive system, myocytes, female reproductive system, enterocytes, which are the cells that line the gut. I mean, these are just some of the notable whole body benefits that creatine has been shown to impact. And we'll delve deeper into these in the coming slides. Now, for those that wonder really how much research is there on creatine, well, I mentioned PubMed previously. This is a screen capture of the PubMed website. And I simply did a search under the term creatine supplementation. And I looked at creatine supplementation and I specifically honed in on human studies. So what is the human research that we have looking at creatine supplementation? And there were 1,776 results that came up. And this was done approximately a couple weeks ago. So we're talking end of May 2025. So there's been a lot of research. When I say there was a lot, I wasn't exaggerating. There really is a ton. So what are some of these studies finding? Well, it has an impact on brain health. It's been shown to boost brain energy. Creatine raises brain levels of phosphocreatine, in effect, fueling our neurons. And this is important because I think a lot of us don't realize to what extent the brain uses up energy reserves. Although the brain only makes up 2% of the body weight of our human body, it consumes a remarkable 20% of our body's energy. I mean, just think about that. Something that consumes such a small amount of our overall body weight, yet consumes such a large, 1/5 to be more exact, of our body energy needs. So, you know, things that involve intensive thought, where your brain is really working on in high gear, really can use up a lot of energy. It's been shown that creatine can help with cognitive performance. It may improve short-term memory and processing speed. And I talk about this extensively. I've had the privilege of doing talks for both amateur and professional sports teams across Canada, including some Olympic athletes quite some years ago. One of them was a skier, actually, or a snowboarder. But the point is that when talking to individuals, one of the things that often comes up, depending on the sport, is concussive injuries. So if someone involved is engaged in mixed martial arts, boxing, football, hockey, what would be another good example? Soccer. These types of activities will often result in the career of individuals at some point during their career, rather, them getting some sort of concussion. And what we've seen from research is that creatine can reduce the damage done when someone sustains a concussion. So it's good from a preventative standpoint. It reduces the extent to which that damage can happen, but it's also good after the fact. They've also been asked, well, what if someone's never used creatine and they sustain a concussive injury? Well, there's also been evidence showing that even using creatine after the fact can be beneficial. Ideally, it's better to have that creatine reserve there when needed in the case of a concussive injury. But it's also, by the way, important for more serious traumatic brain injuries, say in the case of a motor vehicle accident. It can help with traumatic brain injury. And of course, concussions are a form of traumatic brain injury, the severity of which can vary, of course. But the point is that creatine in this application is valuable. I did put together a concussion protocol. If anyone wants a copy of that, please email your account manager, and your account manager, your sales rep, will be more than happy to send you a copy of my concussion protocol, which outlines various strategies, both diet, supplement, and lifestyle strategies that can have an effect at both reducing the damage done if one sustains a concussion, but also speed up brain healing. There's also evidence that creatine can be neuroprotective. It's been investigated in Parkinson's and Huntington's disease, hopefully slowing down the disease. I must say right now, in the context of Parkinson's, the evidence has not been overly compelling. Early days, maybe they need to tweak the study as well in terms of dosing and the length of time and the number of people. All these can factor into whether a study is deemed to be showing benefit for that compound that's been used. But time will tell. I'm sure more evidence will emerge in the coming years, either solidifying the benefits that creatine has to offer or showing that it's not beneficial in the context of these diseases, one or the other. Creatine in mental health, well, it has an impact on brain chemistry. It can boost neurotransmitters via increased brain energy. It may help with anxiety and stress resilience. Certainly, that was the case shown in animal studies where it reduced stress-induced deficits. It can help also with mood support. There's an ever-growing body of research showing that creatine may help alleviate depression. So it actually has some antidepressant activity, and it was shown to be shown to have this effect rather in studies done on people that have depression. And I'll read this study from the American Journal of Psychiatry in 2012. So bear this in mind. This was 13 years ago, and there was already some studies done previous to that showing benefit as well. But I thought this study was not only made a pretty powerful claim, but it was done quite a few years ago. And yet I guarantee if you talk to people, even currently, they didn't realize that creatine has this benefit. So I'll read this verbatim from the study. Human studies have also shown promising results, with some trials indicating that creatine can improve symptoms of major depressive disorder and bipolar depression, especially when used alongside standard antidepressant treatments. So it's really incredible and encouraging to think that if someone is fighting depression, that if they're using already other things as well, this can be a little bit of a boost, if you will. It can be something that they add to their regimen to improve the activity of their antidepressant treatment. So anyway, just something worth noting. Creatine and healthy aging. This is something I've talked about really for many, many years. I've had the privilege of being able to do a number of talks for seniors, including at senior homes. A little bit of a side note. I always found this quite comical. I remember I did a talk years ago. It was near Laura in Ontario. It was at a senior's home. And the person that scheduled the talk, like myself, wasn't aware of the eating schedule of seniors. So I did this talk. It was I think it started at 4:30, if memory serves me correctly. And then I started seeing people leaving my talk in about half an hour. Now, around 5 o'clock, they all started to leave. And I thought, oh, geez, I guess I'm not putting on a very good presentation. It turns out they're actually having dinner. So a lot of, as I've discovered, having my father, mom are deceased, but having had elderly parents, as you get older, you have dinner earlier and earlier, it seems. And it was dinner time. And they knew it was dinner time. And it's like creatine or no creatine, aging talk or no aging talk. I'm not going to hang around and miss my dinner. So they kind of, one by one, I lost my audience. A number have stayed, but a few of them left. Anyway, little side note. So with respect to aging and muscle, there's a very strong relationship between the two. There is your chronological age. So I am 55 years of age. I'd like to believe that my biological age is younger, meaning that I am biologically not aging in step with my chronological age. And what we know is that one of the measures of a person's biological age is their muscle mass. And you can see how creatine would be valuable in this context because creatine slows down age-related muscle loss. That's known, that term, age-related muscle loss, is known as sarcopenia. So the loss of muscle with age is significant and not to be taken lightly. When you slow down muscle loss, that has a profound impact on quality of life. If you can't walk a few hundred meters, you can't walk up a flight of stairs, if you fall and can't get up, if you can't open up a jar, I mean, there are a lot of examples of scenarios where people are unable to do things simply because they have they've lost that muscle mass. So muscle preservation is key. We know that, of course, that loss of strength and function is also problematic. And of course, creatine has been shown to improve muscle strength and endurance in seniors. It also helps indirectly with bone health. You might say, well, what's the relationship? Well, I'm sure as many of you know, there's a direct relationship between muscle mass and bone density. The greater the muscle mass you have, the greater the bone density. We know, for example, when astronauts go into space and they don't, have gravity working on their muscle and working on their bone, they lose bone density. We know that seniors, when they lose bone density, when they lose muscle mass, rather also lose bone density. So it's an indirect route or an indirect means of improving bone density, but by putting more muscle on your frame, you support bone health. And the aging brain. It helps sustain cognitive function in older adults. And there's been studies looking at this. We also know that creatine has been shown to help with cardiovascular health. I'll talk about that in a later slide. So creatine in metabolic health, well, it's been shown to help glucose control. It can actually enhance glucose uptake into cells. It lowers A1C levels and improves glucose tolerance in type 2 diabetics. Yet again, something I'd imagine the vast majority of people aren't aware of. Certainly when I talk to people and mention this, they're like, I had no idea there was a relationship between creatine and glucose control and supporting diabetics, type 2 diabetics in particular. So a lot of really interesting mechanisms. I'm not going to go into in GLUT4 transporter and all of that, but ultimately it can improve the insulin sensitivity in muscle. It can also aid in energy metabolism and help with both chronic fatigue syndrome as well as fibromyalgia. To go off on a bit of a tangent that I think is relevant here, you know, when you go back far enough or early enough in terms of, disease states, and you ask the question, well, what is one of the fundamentally important things we can do when helping people that have certain diseases? Well, I think certainly it would stand to reason, and I don't think too many people would argue this, that energy is a big part of that, right? If your cells don't have the energy to do work, if they don't have, for example, your immune cells, the energy to fight infection, if you don't have the fuel to allow those cells to carry on certain metabolic processes, you can see how the cascading effect would be significant. It would be huge. In fact, one of the talks that I've always really enjoyed doing, because I find it so fascinating, is a talk I do on mitochondrial dysfunction or mitochondrial disorders. These are disorders where the energy producing system, the mitochondria, is the organelle within the cell. It's essentially looks like a little oval shaped, almost football within a cell. That's called an organelle, and the mitochondria is often when there's an energy issue and the mitochondria isn't working properly, that has a huge ripple effect on so many aspects of life. So there's been an ever-growing number of mitochondrial diseases or mitochondrial-related disorders, rather, that have been attributed directly to energy, mitochondria, etc. So given the fundamentally important role that creatine plays with respect to energy and respect to supporting the mitochondria, it would make sense that many things stand to benefit from using creatine. Now, looking at creatine in heart health, it appears to help with heart energy. The heart muscles use creatine in the form of phosphocreatine. And we know that when someone has had heart failure or ischemia, it's been shown to offer benefit if they use creatine. Arrhythmia, of course, in irregular heartbeat, it can reduce arrhythmias in ischemic heart models. And it's been shown to help heart patients or patients rather, that have had heart failure engage in activity and exercise and improve their strength and endurance when they're using creatine versus not using creatine. So for those that have had heart failure, and they want to get back into sport, which they should do because, of course, exercise and cardiovascular health are very much interconnected. We know that if they want to get back into that activity, that creatine can play a role as well. Immune modulation. Well, creatine affects immune cell receptors and signaling. And by the way, the word modulation is important here. People often use the word immune stimulant incorrectly across the board whenever they think something impacts immune function. They say, oh, it's an immune stimulant. There are scenarios where an immune stimulant is not appropriate. A good example of that being autoimmune diseases. When someone has an autoimmune disease, effectively their immune system is turned against itself. The immune system is attacking its own body. So in the case of rheumatoid arthritis, which is an autoimmune disease, not to be confused with osteoarthritis, which is not autoimmune in nature. It's sort of a wear and tear disease. But with rheumatoid arthritis, the body is actually, the immune system is attacking its own cartilage, attacking its own joint. So if you have already an overly active immune system, you can see why giving an individual an immune stimulant isn't a good idea. It's like giving someone that's hyperactive a shot of ephedrine or caffeine. Not a wise idea. What you want is you want to regulate, you want to balance, or in the term the term accurately used in the context of what we're talking about, you want to modulate immune function. Hence the term immune modulation. You want to balance it. So if the immune function is overly active, you want to bring it back down. If it's underactive, you want to bring it up. That ability to modulate immune function or regulate or balance it is called immune modulation. It also has been shown to help reduce inflammation. It lowers there are these inflammatory markers that one can test for. When you get a blood test, you can get these tested for. And it lowers those pro-inflammatory, what's called cytokines, these hormones. Interleukin 6, tumor necrosis factor alpha are lowered when using creatine. It also has been shown to help with neuroinflammation. So inflammation, of course, of the brain. It may reduce that inflammation and have neuroprotective effects. This is one of the ways in which creatine can help those who sustain a concussion. And respiratory conditions, mixed data here, but it may help with COPD and a disease that's very near and dear to my heart. My son has cystic fibrosis. He's 13, healthy, doing wonderful. But it is a genetic disease. And when my son was first diagnosed, they do screen testing when babies are born across Canada. So whenever they have that little heel prick, that's one of the things they test for before they come out of the hospital. And I did a deep dive because cystic fibrosis is a pretty serious disease, and I did a deep dive into CF and looked at what are some of the things that can help that may not be readily recommended. There are many, by the way, both dietary, lifestyle, supplement things that aren't recommended, that aren't mainstream yet. Not that they're not recommended, they're just not mainstream. But there's a lot of research on it. And sure enough, there was some very good research and compelling research on creatine for CF. When I say very good, let me be a bit more accurate. There was compelling research showing some potential benefit. I think more research is warranted, but it was compelling nonetheless. And anyway, so my son is 13. He will be starting creatine fairly soon. I'm in fact probably going to be giving it to him now that he's been actively involved in sport in the coming months. But he's on a cocktail of other supplements and medications, including a life-changing drug called Trikafta, which was revolutionary and has had a huge impact on the lives of those with CF, including our son. So moving along here to other benefits that creatine has to offer. For pregnancy and babies, there's a maternal creatine need that goes up when a mother is pregnant. And when they investigated creatine, they found that it had a protective effect on the brain of a fetus. So I'm sure more research will come, and maybe there might come a time where women who are pregnant are tested for these things and might find that creatine can benefit. So, once again, just sort of giving you an example of just some of the very interesting areas of research that are being explored with creatine. Excuse me. Fertility. Creatine was added to sperm media, like the media where they have the sperm to improve motility. And it was shown to improve in vitro fertilization success. Now, how does this translate into a scenario where couples may have fertility issues? I don't really quite know, to be honest. Um, is there, if creatine was added to, so when they have the sperm in a media, in this solution, and they're trying to allow that sperm to fertilize the ovum, if the sperm's motility is compromised, meaning if that sperm isn't a very good swimmer, it's going to reduce the success of it being able to fertilize the egg. If it improves motility, that'll increase the success. Does that translate into if a person, a man, is unable to have a child or impregnate their partner because it's been deemed, and they test for all these things, right? They'll tell you if you know the what the sperm health is like, the motility. If that sperm isn't as motile as it needs to be, is it possible that if the man supplements with creatine, that may have an impact that's positive? Possibly. Worthy of a deeper dive. I must confess, I haven't looked deep and hard into that area um, with respect to whether it can be beneficial. However, I would be surprised if there really wasn't that discussion within the scientific community. So, something to consider. Neuromuscular diseases, excuse me. There's some very good evidence showing it can be used in muscular dystrophies, motor neuron diseases. Although the results are somewhat mixed, they are certainly encouraging. And by the way, in the context of neuromuscular diseases, creatine has been used for that application for many, many years now. I'd say almost 2 decades in various studies. And then even for skin, there is some evidence that creatine may have a role with respect to wrinkle production. It may have a role to play with respect to collagen production. Still early days. I'd be surprised if there really wasn't a company that jumped on the creatine bandwagon and already made a topical product. I'm sure there must be. I haven't looked, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was. So maybe there is some topical benefit to using creatine. I don't know how effectively it's absorbed dermally. But certainly, maybe from an internal standpoint, it could be very much like collagen. Using it internally is beneficial for the skin. Maybe using creatine would be as well. So, creatine in the context of women and vegetarians. So, women have lower levels of creatine stores than men. In fact, they have about 78% of the creatine levels that are found in men. This is in large part due to two things. Women generally have lower muscle mass, and women typically don't consume as much in the way of foods that are as high as creatine or don't consume as much of those foods. But there is evidence that maybe in part because of these lower baseline creatine levels, that if a woman uses creatine, it may ease her menstrual cycle and support PMS-related fatigue and mood. And there appears to be very ample amounts of evidence showing that women really stand to benefit from using creatine, especially as they get older or if they are active. And I put down in my slide there, you'll see safe and beneficial for active women, not just men, both active and inactive women. By the way, whenever you exercise, with respect to muscle and creatine, it is important to note that when you exercise, you need to do weight-bearing exercise to benefit from the muscle benefits of creatine, right? So it's not like you just take creatine, you suddenly put on all this muscle. You've got to exercise, you've got to do weight-bearing exercise. But getting back to women, for many, many years now, I've heard over and over again from retailers and from women directly who've said, oh, creatine just is very much a supplement that I recommend or only men use. And that is not the case. That should not be the case at all. Women and men can both benefit. But traditionally, it is true that men have overwhelmingly been the largest consumers and users of creatine. But it is not exclusively only for men. Women can benefit, as I've hopefully been able to demonstrate thus far in this presentation. Now, for vegetarians and vegans, there's a really important role for creatine to play. Because vegans don't have any meat or fish in their diet, they are therefore not getting the dietary creatine levels that they would get if they were consuming meat or fish. So supplementation has been shown to improve muscle and cognitive performance, and it's been shown to help vegan athletes maintain training intensity and recovery. So it's been shown to help athletes. And in fact, I remember years ago, one study making the claim, and I think rightfully so, that vegan athletes stand to benefit the most from supplementing with creatine because they're not getting that dietary creatine intake that omnivores are getting. So, quick summary of creatine's remarkable therapeutic range and benefits. Valuable for the brain, the mind, muscle, aging, metabolism, heart, bone, immunity, reproduction, to name a few. And I've elaborated on this further, by the way. This will be a slide made available to all of you. It'll be sent out to your sales reps. All of them will get a copy of this slide, which you can use, you can give out to customers. It'll highlight, once again, the many benefits that have been shown with respect to creatine. This will be likely the other one that you'll be getting as well, which is a summary of creatine's remarkable therapeutic benefits and goes into what is the population or condition that we're talking about and what are the actual reported benefits. Now, getting into creatine and the different forms of creatine, this is interesting as well because there are many different forms of creatine available on the market. However, there are some that have more research, and more notably one, as I'll go into in a moment, and others that have very little research. So as you can see here, there are 17 different forms of creatine that are commercially available. Now, of those 17, really only about 4 or 5 are found in any meaningful way in products. But you'll see in top spot there creatine monohydrate. Creatine monohydrate, bar none, is the most researched form of creatine on the planet. Not only is there more research on this form of creatine, it's the form that has overwhelmingly been used in studies looking at creatine's benefits in sport or therapeutic benefits. So, I'm not going to go into this as another study looking at forms of creatine and the level of evidence. If you go through all of this, and this will be something once again going to be in the presentation I'm going to share, you'll see the level of evidence varies from very high, the highest being creatine monohydrate, to no evidence at all, and it's just something that's been released into the market by manufacturers. On the promise or the hope that it offers benefits. And that's not to say it won't. I will say, although creatine monohydrate is the most researched, tried and true form of creatine, it's the gold standard of creatine. That's not to say other forms don't have benefits. It's just they don't have the same body of evidence. And I've always been of that school of thought that, go with the ones that are tried and true, or at least the ones that have at least some compelling evidence, right? To go with ones that have no evidence other than anecdotal evidence doesn't mean it's not valuable, and time will tell. And with research, hopefully, we'll have a greater understanding of other forms of creatine. But once again, the monohydrate is tried and true form. In terms of delivery systems for creatine, you have powder, liquid, and gummies. Hands down, without debate, the most used form of creatine globally by anyone that's ever used creatine is powder. The most researched form of creatine, bar none, involves using creatine powder. And by the way, the most inexpensive creatine you can get is creatine powder, right? It's the most economical. However, years ago, there was a departure from that. There was a company that was selling a liquid creatine serum that was claiming all of these extraordinary benefits: no bloating, no water retention, better absorption, blah, blah, blah. Just the claims went on and on endlessly. And to add insult to injury, it was incredibly expensive. I don't recall the exact size of the bottle. I think it was like 100 or 150 mils. And it was in the $70 price range. I mean, it was many, many times more expensive than creatine powder. Well, it got tested. And it was actually in a published study, which you can look up, liquid creatine serum study, and I'll be happy to share that with anyone who wants it, or I'll provide that study to your reps, and that way your reps can share it with you. But this study showed some things that were pretty alarming and upsetting. So not only did it not have any measurable creatine at all, like at all, worse still, it had broken down into its metabolic byproduct called creatinine. So creatinine is when creatine breaks down, it breaks down into creatinine. So not only was there no creatine, it actually broken down. In fact, on that note, please bear in mind when you have it in a shake, don't let it sit in the shake for like hours and hours or a whole day. You want to consume it very quickly so you don't, within, a short amount of time, so it doesn't break into creatinine. But this creatine serum was shown to be just hocus pocus. It was just smoke and mirrors, and I believe there was even a lawsuit that came out of it. But anyway, the point is not effective. And then lastly, and more recently, there's creatine gummies. I understand the appeal of using gummies. They taste great, they're convenient. You don't have to mix them with anything, just pop them in, you're good to go. But a few things to consider. One, the dose per gummy is quite low, so you've got to oftentimes use multiple gummies to achieve that 5 gram dose, which we'll talk about dosing in the coming slides. So you got to use quite a few to get that same that therapeutic dose or dose you're going to use if you work out in the gym. Secondly, they are more costly on a per gram basis than creatine monohydrate powder. Thirdly, and most importantly, there has been the question raised of how much creatine is actually in those gummies. Well, sure enough, Now Supplements did study these and they published a report. Now, granted, one could argue, and understandably so, that the research is biased, or the research they did was biased because it was done by a supplement company who doesn't sell creatine gummies. But that would be opening themselves up to litigation, scrutiny. So you think they would have done their due diligence. Nonetheless, what they did find was of the 12 different creatine gummies they tested, 46% of the gummies did not meet label claim. Okay, they did not meet label claim. And some of them had either no creatine at all or well below levels that were claimed on the bottle. Some, in fact, did have a bit more. I've actually blocked out the creatine gummy brand and the lot number. But you can look this up. If you do a quick little Google search yourself, you'll find this talked about in many. There was actually a lot of reports that came out discussing this. So you can find it very easily if you Google it. If you go to nutraceuticalsworld.com and Google creatine gummies, you'll get this information. So not only was there like over almost half, just under half rather, of the gummies did not contain the amount of creatine claimed, but 50%, so half, had creatinine, once again, the metabolic byproduct of creatine. So anyway, just something to think about. So the message here is if you're going to use creatine, use a powder. I'm sure that there will be new and exciting delivery methods coming out that will show that they can meet label claim and they're stable and all of that in the future. I'm quite confident that will likely happen. But for now, until those are available, creatine powder is the way to go. Now, in terms of dosing, excuse me, you can do a few things. You can do what's called a creatine load, or take creatine and do what I call the slow and steady approach. The creatine load technique is really quite straightforward. You take 5 grams of creatine, which is about a teaspoon. You do that 4 to 5 times a day. So let's say you have it 4 times a day. That's 20 grams of creatine. You do that every day for 1 week, 7 days. In that 7-day period, it's been shown that creatine very quickly saturates the brain and the muscles. Okay, so you get maximal creatine saturation if you do a creatine load. The slow and steady approach is you take 5 grams a day, or once again a teaspoon, but now you do it every day for 3 to 4 weeks, only once a day. In that time span, it will also completely saturate the muscle in the brain. It just takes longer. Instead of it being 7 days, it can take 3 to 4 weeks. Now, I think for the vast majority of people, that's the way to go. People ask me, well, why would you ever want to do a load? Well, I answer by saying, the only application where I can see a load being beneficial is if someone that was involved in some activity had never previously used creatine. That's a bit shocking to think of that scenario because you'd have to be hiding under a rock if you're an athlete. It is the most used supplement in sport by a wide range of athletes. So it'd be kind of surprising they wouldn't have heard of it. But let's assume for a moment they hadn't. And they've got a competition in about a week or a week and a half's time. And they realize, oh, I'm in a powerlifting competition. I'm rowing in a week, or I'm sprinting, or whatever the case might be. And I never heard of creatine. How do I get the full benefit? How do I get those benefits quickly? Well, then you could maybe do a load, right? That scenario is the only one that I can think of, unless there's some, a metabolic disorder with where they require, there is a condition where you need creatine, you can benefit from creatine supplementally, or unless there's a medical condition where someone could benefit and wants to get those benefits faster than the 3 to 4 week slow and steady approach. I will say this, and I touch on this later in this slide. There is another benefit to be had from using the slow and steady approach, which is people that do a creatine load will sometimes complain about gastrointestinal upset because they're having such a high amount each day. And that is much rarer in the context of those who do the 5 grams 3 to 4 times a week dose versus those that creatine load. I believe I touch on that later in the slide, in one of the slides. So creatine safety profile. Well, it goes without saying when something is this heavily researched, it has a long-standing safety profile. It's been extensively studied, as I've already demonstrated. There are no serious side effects in healthy individuals that use 3 to 5 grams daily, even long-term. There is a mild effect in which there's some initial water gain, but that water gain, by the way, and we'll address this in the myths section or the FAQ section later in the presentation. Muscle hydration is important. It's invaluable for all of us, right? So it's actually a good thing. You don't get water buildup in other areas. It's just in the muscle. But getting back to mild effects, the other thing that once again I touched on a moment ago is there's some possible mild gastrointestinal upset when you use the loading phase or the high dose every day, which once again, that likelihood of that happening goes down dramatically, very less likely when someone does the slow and steady approach. Hydration, it's important to hydrate in general. It's a good practice. Many people have been shown to be chronically dehydrated. I did a presentation on this many years ago on just the level of dehydration in the general population. So having adequate amounts of water is important, but it's especially important in the context of creatine because creatine, that water gets carried to the muscle, not the other areas outside the muscle in particular. And what happens is that water in the muscle, that hydrated muscle performs better. When you have increased water pressure in the muscle, it's referred to the osmotic pressure. When you increase the osmotic pressure in the muscle is able to contract more effectively, right? Which is, of course, important if you're lifting weights or doing anything that involves, muscle, because muscle contracts and relaxes. So that contractile strength is very much interconnected with creatine and hydration, optimal hydration. And then quality. Using pure tested creatine and avoiding adulterants. We'll touch on this when we discuss the PVL Creapure in a moment. Now let's look at some creatine myths, and there are many over the years. I've heard them all. I mean, like I said, I've been doing talks on creatine for years, and I've heard them all. So one common myth is that creatine is a steroid. That is false. It is not a hormone. Creatine is a nutrient. I understand why some people have confused it with steroids, because in their mind, anything that can increase muscle mass, anything that is anabolic gets lumped into the it must be a steroid category. Well, it's not. It's nothing like a steroid whatsoever. Does it increase muscle mass? Yes. Is it a steroid? No. Bad for kidneys and even bad for liver. This is also false. There is absolutely no evidence of harm. And by the way, there's been many studies done, and one of the researchers actually made a very strong claim about this, where they said there's unequivocally overwhelming evidence showing that creatine does not harm the kidneys. However, and there is a however here, this is if you're a healthy individual. When someone has kidney disease, they should absolutely speak to their doctor before they start using creatine. I already mentioned that creatinine is a metabolic byproduct when you have creatine. In fact, when you test for kidney function, one of the things you test for is elevated levels of creatinine. There are normal levels of creatinine, but elevated levels are a sign that there is some kidney stress or kidney issues going on. If someone has kidney disease, their kidneys are not obviously functioning properly, and their ability to utilize and metabolize creatine is compromised. And I always say, people with kidney disease have to be cautious of a whole host of supplements and foods in general. I mean, I sadly know this from experience with someone that I knew that had kidney disease, where they actually passed away as a result of elevated levels of ammonia. And how would that happen? When you consume protein, one of the byproducts of protein is ammonia, and ammonia is toxic. But if your kidneys are functioning properly, your body is able to eliminate that ammonia. You convert ammonia to urea. Urea gets converted to urine, and we eliminate via the kidneys. Uh, what we know is that if the kidneys aren't functioning properly and they're really in bad shape, that ammonia level can build up, and that can be dangerous. And that's what happened in this individual who sadly and tragically passed from kidney disease. Was the ammonia levels were not something they could control in the hospital. So even protein intake is scaled back. I mean, if you look at the protein intake of someone with kidney disease, it's way lower than would be the case for someone who doesn't have kidney disease. So my point is that there are always sort of going to be exceptions to the rule. And when someone has a disease state, you've got to do your due diligence and be more cautious. And they've got to make sure they speak to a physician, a nephrologist, or their GP before they start utilizing creatine. It can cause hair loss. Well, this is unproven. There was one very weak study that's been since debunked and just completely demolished because it was just so poorly done, linking creatine with DHT or dihydrotestosterone. DHT has been shown, although the evidence seems to be getting weaker and weaker from year to year, it's been linked to hair loss. Now, what we do know is that, the more testosterone you have, the greater the likelihood that you're going to break it down into DHT. Well, what increases testosterone? Exercise, right? Both in men and women. And what they believe happened in this study, where they thought it might cause maybe contributing to hair loss, was that they were exercising as well as using creatine. And of course, when you exercise, you produce more testosterone. So, but once again, this study was shown to be, and they haven't been able to replicate this study, right? So, it was likely other factors at play and not the creatine. So, this claim is certainly unproven. It can cause water retention. Well, I answered this by saying kind of, as I mentioned a moment ago, water is retained in the muscle, which is a good thing. You want that water in the muscle. You want that hydration. It's not going to make you bloated. It's not going to give you water in other tissues. It's not going to cause, your other areas of your body to swell up with water. That's not going to happen. It really allows the water to go where it needs to go, in this case, the muscle. It can cause dehydration and cramps. Well, this is false. Studies show that those that use creatine have equal or less cramping versus those that were not given creatine. So this myth has been debunked. Only for young men. False. It benefits women, seniors, and this is a tricky one, even teens in safe doses. Now, up until not that long ago, I would typically, when asked the question, would I recommend creatine to teens? I would say that really is a decision between the teenager, their parent, their coach, their doctor, right? And why? Because we simply didn't have research being done on teenagers looking at creatine and that population group. It was always done, these studies were always done on adults, on people over the age of 18. So you can't just automatically assume if it's good for adults, it's safe and good for teenagers. Now, that said, and I've dealt with this firsthand. I've done presentations for coaches and their teams, and some of these teams were teenagers, right? These teams that I took that I did these talks for were at a high level in their sport. I mean, a very high level, and their goal was to ultimately become pro. And of course, they're going to look for a competitive edge. Their coaches are going to look for a competitive edge. Even their parents are going to look for a competitive edge, right? And as a consequence, many of them, will use creatine. Now, where I stood on the fence up until more recently was, once again, there was no evidence. But now the ISSN, once again, that association that is really kind of the dominant one in terms of researching nutrients in sport, has gone on record in a study they published a few years ago stating that it's safe to use by teens. I will say this, that still think it's important to discuss this with their doctor, their coach, their parent, etc. Given the high prevalence of teenagers using steroids, and I've done, by the way, talks on this in high schools as well. It's really become a problem, teenagers using steroids. If you're going to look at the lesser of two evils, it's a no-brainer. Not that steroids and creatine are once again the same thing. But if they want that edge, would I much rather they use creatine? Well, absolutely. I in fact always have and will continue to always discourage the use of anabolic androgenic steroids in teens, right? There's a list of whole list of side effects and problems that are well documented, right? So once again, a conversation to be had between parent, the young adult, the rather the teenager, and of course their doctor, their coach, etc. Creatine increases fat mass. False. It increases lean muscle mass, period. It'll make you tighter, stronger. It will not increase fat mass. It will just increase lean muscle mass. I've heard this one repeatedly and almost exclusively from women. Oh, I can't use creatine. I don't want to get too big and muscular if I use it. I always say jokingly, I wish it was that easy. You take a scoop of creatine a day and you get extra muscle. If it was that easy, we'd all be so lucky. The reality is you've got to work out and work out hard to get that increased muscle mass if you use creatine, right? You've got to do weight bearing exercise. You can't just take creatine and lo and behold, you go to sleep one night and wake up and you're muscle bound, or after a month of taking creatine. You want to take creatine and exercise, and that'll put on muscle, but it won't put on the kind of muscle that makes you muscle bound. I mean, that takes some real intense workouts. I mean, really intense high level workouts to get the kind of muscularity that I think, unfortunately, a lot of these women are concerned about when they see in magazines. These individuals, two factors, they are working out very intensely. They're often quite young. And in some cases, they use anabolics, right? They use a bunch of anabolics to kind of put on that mass. It doesn't just have, even though some like to claim, oh, it's just good genetics. Genetics plays a part in it. Make no mistake about it. But so does exercise, diet, and in some cases, they get a bit of a helping hand from the use of anabolic androgenic steroids as well, right? So anyway, women, do not worry about using creatine and putting on muscle. Putting on some muscle will do you a lot of good. Okay, that should hopefully be obvious by now. And now let's close by going into the various creatine choices. I want to make this point before I forget. Any existing customer of ours that has an account that listens into this PowerPoint this webinar, and it's got to be the live webinar. I want to emphasize that. If they've listened to the live webinar, they have a choice of one of these three things. So it's either a retailer or a health practitioner as an account. If you are a consumer or someone who doesn't have an account with us, I hope you found the information invaluable and useful, and that's reward enough. But we are going to be giving a free product to retailers and customers of ours, health professionals that have an account with us. So these are one of the three options you have to choose from. So please let your sales rep know which one you want to use. You've got the PVL Gold Series, the Creapure Creatine, the PVL with our natural series, and it says 100% pure creatine in the white bottle. And then on the far right, it's the PVL Pro series. That's the Creatine X8. So let's do a deeper dive into each of these by first beginning with a talk about PVL. PVL is the acronym for Pure Vita Labs. We are a Canadian company, 100% family owned, 100% made in Canada. We have our manufacturing facility in Port Coquitlam, BC, as well as our warehouse, our lab, we do all of that in-house, and we have a facility also in Toronto that sends it out just to expedite shipping. It is important to note that we are our own manufacturer. A lot of companies, as I'm sure many of you are aware, have their products made by a third-party manufacturer. They outsource the manufacturing. We do not. We make it in-house, our own facility, our own state-of-the-art facility. We have been in business for 29 years. We're going to be celebrating our 30th anniversary next year. So the Canadian story hopefully resonates with you the way it does with me. The fact that we make it in-house, the fact that it's family owned, the fact that it's made by we've got almost 200 employees that we employ here in Canada, and a few that we employ outside of Canada as well, because we are also PVL is distributed globally. I don't remember the exact number of countries, but it's in many countries in New Zealand, Australia, Middle East. It's distributed in South America. Central America. So we've got a large distribution network of PVL. But anyway, really an important part to tell you, important part of the story is just the PVL Canadian element, which I think is certainly meaningful to me, and all the more so now with Canadians trying to protect their own and tariffs and all of that craziness that's going on in the world. So one of the things that's important to hopefully appreciate, and hopefully you will appreciate this about PVL, is that all of the PVL products are tested and informed choice certified. Now, informed choice is a certification that ensures the product is safe and free of banned substances. And this is important, especially for athletes. If you go to the PVL website, I encourage you to do that, or if you go to the PVL Instagram page, you'll see how many athletes we work with that are ambassadors of PVL. These are professional, amateur, and Olympic athletes. I actually was showing a friend of mine recently how many athletes we endorse and support that are part of the PVL family, and he was actually really quite blown away because there really is a very large number of them. So because we are so intertwined with the athletic community, a community which gets frequently tested for banned substances, it's important to them and important to us that we ensure that our products are free of those substances, which can ultimately get them either disqualified or we're still banned from their sport altogether. And why is this important? Because we know that consumers were shown to have often trust issues with certain brands, or with brands that don't have third-party certification. And this 29 survey, and I'll read this verbatim, found that trust claims tested and certified by independent organizations more than claims made by product manufacturers are what consumers look for. That's what they look for, right? And understandably so. So all of PVL's products go through a rigorous four-stage process to become Informed Choice certified. And you'll see that Informed Choice logo there in the black and green with the check mark on our products. So now let's look first at the PVL Creapure Creatine Monohydrate. So first of all, the Gold Series is creatine monohydrate exclusively. But more specifically, we use the Creapure form of creatine monohydrate. This is German creatine. It is considered the gold standard, if you will, the Cadillac or Mercedes of creatines. It's 99.99% pure, the highest in the industry, period. It's the most studied form of creatine, once again, on the planet, the monohydrate form. It is vegan compliant. And by the way, on that note, creatine powders are all vegan. Okay, there was this interesting influencer, and I always love it when these influencers are misinformed, and it just bothers me that they're giving people misinformation. But this influencer that was aligned with the brand made a video saying our creatine is vegan and you don't want to be using creatine powders that are made from animal content. Well, that's false information. All creatine powders are vegan compliant. They're not made from, they're synthesized. They combine amino acids together and they make it. It's not something that is extracted from meat or from fish. That's false information that unfortunately he was conveying to the audience. This Creapure creatine from Germany is exclusively manufactured in-house by their, and it's done in a facility that has pharmaceutical grade, manufacturing. And what's important is all this company makes, period, is creatine. They make nothing else. There's no chance of there being some cross-contamination. So it really is the creme de la creme in terms of creatines in the world. And once again, look for that Creapure logo if that's the one that you want, the PVL Gold Series creatine. Excuse me. And then we have our PVL Natural Series. This is a micronized creatine monohydrate. Once again, monohydrate. Micronized just means it's a smaller particle size. So it's a much smaller particle size. So it dissolves more quickly and more effectively. So it goes into solution more easily. It is also vegan. And of course, it goes through the Informed Choice vigorous testing. All of the PVL products are also certified strong science. It's a third-party certification where there's actually, I believe the head of the company has a PhD. And what they do is they make sure that the product, the dosing, all of that meets specific scientific criteria. It's validated scientifically. The dose is right, the form is right, etc. to qualify for that certified strong science seal of approval. You get 5 grams of creatine per scoop. By the way, the same thing, let me go back to it. The same thing you get with the Creapure, 5 grams per scoop. So in both cases, it's 5 grams per one scoop. And then lastly, there is a product that the owner, Jim McMahon, and myself co-created. It's called Creatine X8. And we really tried to use, I think, a pretty innovative approach. We said, okay, let's use the tried and true form of creatine, monohydrate. In this case, we use 4 grams. However, we wanted to augment the benefits. So what we did was we added an amino blend of leucine, isoleucine, valine. Those trio are called branched chain amino acids. And we've added taurine. And why? Because those 4 amino acids decrease levels of a hormone called creatine kinase. And creatine kinase, when levels are elevated, when you test someone and they're elevated levels of creatine kinase, it means that they're breaking down muscle. So the idea was to protect against muscle protein breakdown, hence the inclusion of those amino acids. There's other benefits to be had. The BCAAs are anabolic, anti-catabolic. There's a lot of other benefits to be had. Not a talk for today, but something to make a note of. And then lastly, the creatine synthesis blend is a blend of 3 specific amino acids: glycine, arginine, and methionine. Why those 3? Remember I mentioned that we make creatine endogenously within our own body? We do so by using those 3 aminos. Creatine is made from glycine, arginine, and methionine. So we gave you the building blocks of the creatine in the form of those 3 aminos to help you make more creatine. So 3-pronged approach. Provide you with creatine monohydrate, protect from muscle protein breakdown, provide the raw materials needed to build or make more creatine endogenously in the body. That's the trifecta that we've used. So now let's get into the last section of the presentation, retail strategies, where to place creatine. So I hope I've been able to demonstrate today that creatine is not just a sports nutrition supplement. Therefore, it should be featured in your wellness section, your healthy aging section, your vegetarian section. If you've got a section for nootropics, it should be there as well. Cross merchandise, put it by your protein powders. In fact, on that note, when it comes to absorbing creatine, they did a study where they gave creatine in carbs, in 100-gram carbohydrate beverage, or they gave people creatine with 50 grams of carbs and 50 grams of protein. And they found the absorption of the protein carb group was equal to the group that was getting twice the amount of carbs, the 100-gram group. The benefit there is that you can add it to your protein shake. As long as your protein shake has some carbs, which they typically would. If you make a protein shake, you should always add typically some carbohydrates post-workout to replenish the glycogen stores in the muscle. That would be the best scenario. But anyway, adding it with your protein powder in your protein powder section makes sense. In a brain health or senior health aisle, all these areas make a lot of sense. Signage. Make a sign saying creatine for energy, brain, and muscle health, or for energy, brain, senior health, to kind of broaden that message. And even starter packs. I have a presentation I've done for many years now called Foundational Health Supplements. So what are the core supplements everyone should use? Multivitamin, EFAs, probiotics, protein. Throw creatine in that mix as well, right? Help customers that are new, that have the right needs, understand the value they'll get from having creatine as well. Excuse me. Staff trainings. Share this link with them, the recording of this presentation. Ensure your customers, or your team rather, your staff know the full story behind creatine beyond just its benefits for muscle. Use simple language. When I went into ATP, ADP, it's often can be a bit confusing. Just simply say, creatine helps your cells make energy efficiently. And share success stories. I share some stories with the golfer. I'm sure you have probably some of your own. It's always a great way to kind of convey some of the real life benefits that you've experienced directly or indirectly with creatine. And then leverage the free tools. I'll be giving you a copy of this PowerPoint. You have creatine handouts that are going to be provided by your sales rep that I've created. There's a creatine benefit handout, FAQ section. All of these are at your disposal. Just simply ask your rep for it. So that's the presentation. I hope all of you today found this information invaluable. You see the full benefit of creatine beyond its scope in sport. And I hope that both personally as well as with clients, you expand the use of creatine. And please, if you can, if you have any positive feedback, you could share with your sales reps. That's invaluable for us as well. We love to have, real life stories of people that use creatine. I've got many that I could share of stories of my own with clients of my own over the many years of recommending creatine. But if you have any of your own, it's always wonderful if you could share that with your sales reps. So thank you all very much for the time that you spent with me today. I hope you found this information useful, and I hope that it helps you and helps your customers going forward. Thank you, and have a great rest of the day, everyone.